Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our September Town Hall. I'm delighted you could join us for this. We have got, as ever, we have got a packed agenda. We are going to go through our global, go for a GBTA update from a global perspective from Jens Lieltorp, our European representative on the board of directors, and then from Europe update from me. And then we're going into a really interesting discussion that has been put together by the European Accommodations Committee, starting off with some brilliant data insights from Peter Glover at TripBAM, and then discussion with Juliet Howe and Ben Park about how to address challenges by building successful buyer-supplier relationships. So as I say, a lot to get through this morning as ever. And I am now going to hand over to Jens, who's going to give our update from the global board. Jens, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm trying to get my camera on. All right, here we go. Thanks, Catherine, and hello to you all. Catherine, can you go to next slide, please? All right, so I'm going to talk to you for 5-10 minutes about what's going on in GBTA Global. We don't have that much time. I have a few slides, but probably don't have time to talk in depth to all of them. So maybe there'll be a little bit time for questions afterwards. And if not, then you are anytime welcome to reach out to me. So in these 5-10 minutes, I hope to give you some idea about the recent board elections, the rebranding of GBTA, give you some feedback from the August GBTA convention in San Diego, and talk a bit about just a few of the recent and upcoming GBTA activities, and lastly, say a few words on the focus of GBTA going forward. Next slide, please. So board elections, as you may recall, they took place this summer in July. There were 2 direct, that's buyer, and 1 allied, that's a supplier, seats up for election, and you can see the new board members listed in this slide. There was a fair share of votes from most countries, and of course a quorum was reached. But that said, I think it would be really nice if even more members would make their voices heard and take part in the reshaping of GBTA. So that's a personal comment. I often hear that GBTA remains too US-centric. I personally think that this has improved, but when it comes to voting for the board or even nominating yourself or someone else, it is the exact right opportunity to support GBTA to become even more global and have a greater European presence. So this time, just one non-US person got elected, and that was a Canadian, Sue Spear, nobody from Europe. And I think that there was just a few European candidates, maybe just one, I don't recall exactly. And in this context, I think it's worth noting that even though Canada just has about 200 members, it is they still got a person elected. So it's not impossible to get European candidates elected. And I guess myself, I am an example of that. But of course, it requires European candidates to make themselves available, and maybe next time. So I hereby recommend you to do that. And in the slide, there's a link to the full GBTA board and leadership if you wish to look more into that. Next slide, please. As you have probably noticed, also in these slides, GBTA has renewed its branding, visuals, wording, and commitments. This means, among other things, that GBTA will keep a focus to build a business travel community and strengthen relationships. What that means is to be more like an industry support family rather than just being a networking group. It means to prioritize learning over education, learning being going above training, but also including peer-to-peer learnings. And to keep advocacy efforts as a core pillar of what GBTA does to forward travel. I'll get back to that a little later on. As part of the rebranding, the old GBTA portal and hub were also updated. As you probably have noticed, they were often not functioning well. They were not easily searchable or accessible. And rather than just putting lipstick on a pig, I think is the expression, it was decided to build more efficiently maintainable GBTA platforms. As a result, if you now enter the GBTA portal, so gbta.org or the hub, then I'm sure you will find them both to be much more accommodating and likable. I had to say, though, that it is still somewhat of a work in progress. Switching a tech platform sometimes gives challenges, and there are still some tech issues, but it's taking shape. And it's my understanding that if you access, for instance, the hub via Google Chrome, then it should be working okay. In any case, the GBTA hub remains a treasure trove of travel management goodies. It's a place to search and find, to meet and exchange with peers, and I really urge you to make use of it. It is and should continue to be a fundamental source of information for GBTA members. So please take a look at it. Next slide, please. As you may know, the annual US GBTA convention is an extremely important global event for GBTA, and that is for educational, but also financial and new members attraction reasons. So it's really good to see that the convention is returning well from the pandemic, even though not yet to former size and shape. And as you can see, the figures are really good, 4,600 attendees, and also attracting quite a few first-timers in San Diego. It's also very encouraging when you look at the feedback from attendees. The satisfaction level, the Net Promoter Score, has grown from +14, which was in Orlando last year, to 37 points in San Diego this year. So that's a very successful and important result, which also mirrors the feedback that I've been hearing. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the San Diego convention myself this year, but I understand that quite a few new initiatives were taken, among other things. And this is very operational, you may say, but still we got a lot of good feedback for that. Rather than having a normal end of room front stage, you know, the normal setup, they had a round centered main stage, which we got a lot of good feedback for. There was a sustainability pavilion, the green stage and green talks. There were two hugely successful buyer-only roundtables. It's definitely something to build on. There was a theater in the expo area, and there were held education sessions there, and something called a tech safari. And then there were also a couple of major research pieces launched. There was a 2022 Business Travel Index and a 2023 Business Travel Forecast. Next slide, please. So I would like to point you in the direction of the sustainability toolkit, which was launched just a couple of months ago. It consists of 12 modules in 3 parts, and they're all placed and available on the hub. Part A, the starter's guide, is ready and available. The rest, Part B, getting the data right, and Part C, how to travel smarter and better, are works in progress. By this initiative, I think GBTA is setting new standards and ways of working with sustainability for travel managers and the industry. And I recommend you to take a closer look at it if sustainability is important in your company. I would also like to inform you that a couple of global surveys are coming up this fall. They're vaguely similar, as they both aim to serve somewhat similar purposes: understanding member demographics and needs in the context of the hub, education, and membership value. And on top of this, we already ran a European survey this summer, and the results of which are still being worked on. But thanks for responding to those of you who did. It's very important. I would also like to remind you about the monthly call for Volunteer of the Month nominations. It's such a nice thing to nominate a colleague and to be recognized. And to me, this is also about getting to know your peers better and building a network. So please take a look around yourself and your peers, and use the link in this slide to nominate someone that you would like to recognize for their work and contributions. Lastly, I just mentioned the research that was launched at the convention, and I've included them in this slide. So one is about socioeconomic developments in the industry, and the other is more about pricing forecast, and they can both be found on the hub. Links are included in the slide. So next slide, please. On this slide, you can see some of the board focus areas for the coming year. We wish to drive membership through a more segmented individual approach. We wish to attract and support next generation travel professionals, and to become even more global, and to always work for diversity and inclusion. In support of this, GBTA has also defined a few commitments. We wish to be member focused. So members, volunteers, and event attendees are what makes GBTA great. And GBTA is here to listen to them, learn from them, and serve their needs with the right platforms. Of course, we aim to be truly global. What that means is that the GBTA will act as a truly global organization, understanding that the impact of global trends that affect us all will vary locally. That said, we are now close to 7,000 members globally, so we are picking up after the pandemic, and members are primarily from US and Europe, but we have a presence on all continents. Then we wish to rebuild trust. For decades, GBTA has been the organization that the industry trusts to build a community with peers, to learn and grow their careers and advocate for their interests. And we're committed to rebuilding that relationship. All of that said, change will not happen overnight. It will be a process of listening, learning, and evolving with the business travel community that we're all part of. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and I really just want to highlight the core principles and areas of focus for GBTA when investing in advocacy, that being our efforts to support and drive industry issues with authorities and governmental bodies. And as you can see, this is about facilitating life for travelers to reduce friction in travel. It's about making sure that taxes and fees that are levied on the travel ecosystem are also reinvested to the benefit of the same travel ecosystem. And we aim to always include the perspectives of business travel in the travel industry, infrastructure matters, and to work for sustainable travel solutions with lawmakers and the industry. And then lastly, on advocacy, and these will be more or less my last words, I hope that you have received the September version of the GBTA Europe Advocacy newsletter. A lot of efforts have been put into making this a more easy, brief, and understandable read, a translation, if you like, of governmental EU language and in highlights. So I would like to thank the GBTA Europe team for their work on this. It's just what we need, and it's a very nice job done. So thanks for that. And that concludes, I think, what I had on mind. I'm not sure about timing. Thanks for listening. Again, if you have questions, suggestions to GBTA and the board, please feel free to reach out to me or connect via LinkedIn. Do we have time for questions, Catherine?
So we have got one question that's come through, and it was the question about how the volunteer of the month is selected, and is it voted for? And I must confess, Jens, I don't know if you know on this. My understanding is that people put in nominations, and it is selected by members of the board. But I would need to double check on that, unless you've got that information.
You put me on the spot, because I don't know for sure myself. Yeah. I did a couple of nominations myself, and I should know. I'm sorry, I don't. But I think it's a fair question. I think we should, clarify it and then feed it back, maybe as part of the process for nomination. So how are selections actually made?
Absolutely. Very, very fair question. Okay. Well, Jens, thank you so much for that update. And as you say, advocacy is it's sort of a hugely important part of what we're doing. And I'm very excited about the plans for the autumn, particularly around the EU's sustainability legislation, and then also what we're doing in the UK. This is the first year that we've really started advocating in the UK. So, and we're really trying to build up our presence there, particularly given the change in administration. So, but thank you, Jens, and thank you for all your support and your great representation of Europe on the board.
Thanks for listening.
No problem. Thank you. So on to Europe, and this is more of an update in terms of activities of what we're doing. We have got our conference coming up in Brussels in November. It's the first time we're out of Germany in a number of years. And so I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about what's different about it this time. The image on the right is just basically an image of the venue. It's quite a, you know, we're basically taking over a city centre convention centre, and we have got to navigate quite a large space. And so we're trying our best to make that as fun as we possibly can. We want to really, we really looked at our survey results, excuse me, from our Berlin event and from previous events. And so we are trying to build the best environment possible for buyers to come together to network. For education, I have got everything going on here at the minute. For education sessions, we're trying to gamify the transitions between these different parts of the venue. We are going to do post-education Ask the Expert opportunities. We are doing tech talks in the expo. We've got a podcast booth, and there's also an extensive free conference program. It's a sustainability summit and ISO 31030 travel risk management toolkit. In terms of our program, we've got one of the most senior EU officials for DG Move, Henrik Hollolay. He's going to be opening keynote. We've got a great CEO panel that will be moderated by our very own Suzanne Nofang, featuring Chris Galanti, Charlie Salton, and Harry Homeister. So we've got Flight Centre Travel Group represented, Concur, and Lufthansa Group. We are also looking at innovation and how innovation is incorporated into a travel program. So we've got Jordan Bray from Plug and Play. He will be speaking. And then we're really looking at how we got, one of our biggest challenges in the industry is around, the workforce and how we bring that back, given the labour shortages and the war on talent. So we've got enterprise, serious recruitment, and as many of you will remember, Yvonne Moya from Randstad University are all coming to speak on that. Our big idea is going to be very much around that whole travel and the law of attraction. We're working with BCD Travel on this, and it's about how we attract people back to the industry, but also how we make travel more attractive to travellers, and how the travel program can be part of a way in which you can recruit and engage employees. And then our big night out is back. I'm so thrilled that we're now in a position where we can have a large social event, and so enterprise once again are working with us on that, and so that, I think that should be a really good fun night. The early bird price break is coming up on the 28th of September. So please do make sure, if you're planning to go, make sure you register before then, because there are a lot of savings to be made. And before we get to Brussels, we have got our Milan conference coming up on the 5th of October. Again, a fantastic program with a lot of content on D&I, sustainability, and MICE. And we have got, thank you to all of the sponsors who are supporting that. The team between the fantastic GBTA Italy board and Fulvio Origo, who's our country manager there. We've really engaged a lot more sponsors this year, so thank you for that. And then next week we've got our Carrefour des Experts in France, in Paris. It's in partnership with IFTM. And so we've got some great content there, and I say the GBTA France team is working hard on that at the moment. All of the information on these are available on our beautiful new branded website. So now on to the meat of our town hall. This is a session on building successful buyer and supplier relationships. It's been put together by the European Accommodations Committee, and to get us kicked off, Peter Glover from TripBAM is going to share some insights. I would say if you have any questions for Peter or the board or myself or Jens, please do put them in the Q&A and we will do our best to get to those. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Catherine, and hello, everyone. I think we thought before we sort of started the expert panel exchange, it might be useful just to sort of level set with where we're seeing the accommodation landscape, both here in Europe and globally. And TripBAM does something called a market snapshot. So we regularly take a view of what's actually happening in terms of volumes and rates and locations and everything that we can about sort of the global landscape around the transient business sort of accommodation picture. If we go to the next slide, Catherine, I'll dive straight in. So there's lots of numbers on here and I don't expect you to look at them, remember them, or necessarily worry that much about them. But in terms of picking out some of the key observations that we have, first of all, these are statistics pulled from the client base that TripBAM had in 2019. So we're sort of using 2019 as our benchmark to gauge how well the accommodation sector has recovered from where we were before the pandemic. So we look at the clients we had then and we look at them today. So we exclude any new business that's been picked up since. That sits to one side of this. So this is looking at sort of apples for apples in terms of how business has recovered. And I have to say, I'm fairly surprised. It's difficult. I'm fairly surprised at just how well the accommodation sector has bounced back in terms of volumes and especially in terms of rates for the hoteliers. But it just always feels that we're remaining on something of a knife edge. So the stats that we've got here, you'll see were picked off on the 12th. And that's because everything is so sort of movable at the moment that to look at 2 weeks ago would have meant they were probably out of date and the insights that we had wouldn't be relevant. So this is all taking into account sort of as of this week and comparing the previous sort of 90 days versus where we were in the same time 2019. So as you might see, but the top left there, we're actually just 15% below. So this is hotel bookings in Europe. So it could be made anywhere around the world. But we're about 15% down on where we were at this time in 2019. No major changes across the board in terms of the category of hotel that people are staying in, all the cancellations that are being made. The one standout item is that despite being 15% down, we're actually $10 a night higher in the market rate, and we'll drill down into that a little bit more as we go through. But yeah, I think just to be back up in sort of a year since we were still locked in a pandemic and be back up at sort of 85% of where we were in 2019, I think marks a fantastic recovery. I will just say that I think it's fragile, and as we go through the next couple of slides, I'll try and bring out why I personally think it's still quite fragile. But Catherine, if we could go to the next. So again, just looking at the last 90 days, you'll see the big dip, which isn't unusual, but it seemed more extreme this year. I don't know if, again, people had been desperate for a holiday that they hadn't been able to take before, but we saw a big drop through August. Business travel virtually stopped. As we've left August, you'll see again the big spike as we go up on that right-hand side, and bookings are growing very strongly. What we haven't seen yet, and we'll talk about this in a moment, is lots of our larger clients, particularly city institutions, they've barely got back up and running. A lot of what we've seen is coming from other sectors. So the big city banks and what have you, based in London and New York and Zurich and Hong Kong, Singapore, they're still lagging behind the growth that's come back from other sectors. Asia Pac, again, the visitors from there's a lag because they've sort of extended the time that they've been suffering from COVID ramifications more than parts of Europe and the US, but we are expecting that to return sort of in this sort of Q3, Q4. And then we have the threat of recession that I think looms not just over the UK, but over certainly Europe, and I think the rest of the world in some way, shape or form, just makes this recovery feel somewhat fragile. And that's the picture for Europe, Middle East and Africa for just the last 90 days. And we update this regularly. So as long as Catherine lets me come on, I'll keep sharing this as we go through. Just again, so perhaps you can benchmark how your organizations are recovering in terms of volumes and rates compared with others. If we go to the next slide, Catherine. So again, the stark reality of it, and this is where we should all be sort of punching the air and jumping up and down like little leprechauns, because the recovery from where we were just a year ago is quite stark. So globally, our clients were effectively 70% down. So we only had 30% of the volumes going through TripBAM just on the 9th of September last year. And that now globally has jumped up to sort of north of 75%. So it is a tremendous recovery from 30% of the volumes to over 70% of the volumes within a year. And I don't think, if you'd have asked me last December, I would have thought we'd see numbers quite that strong at this point. I'd have thought there was still a lag, but clearly things have recovered in terms of volumes and people are traveling again. And again, the big mismatch is sort of a year ago as well, market rates for about $33, $35 down per room night globally, and they're now $10 above where they were in 2019. So again, a strong recovery in rates as well as in volumes. In fact, arguably greater in rates than in volumes. The next slide, Catherine. I think we look at EMEA, which is an even starker recovery. So we were down at sort of 25% of our volumes. And in the April before that, we were down at minus 90%. So we had about 10% of our volumes left. So looking at how we've gone from being sort of 75% plus down to only 15% down, I think that's a tremendous recovery for us as an industry. And I think that's something that we should rejoice in. You want to go to the next one, Catherine? Again, it's not, all men and women are not created equal. So we're seeing a huge change in some key cities, both in terms of rates and in terms of the number of nights they're getting. London has sort of fallen off the chart in terms of its attractiveness. I think we've seen lots of organisations have arranged meetings at sort of secondary and tertiary destinations. So they might have a team meeting in Barcelona or Berlin rather than go to where the head office in London is currently sitting empty. So we're seeing that starkly both in London and in Dublin, to be fair. That doesn't seem to have affected the rates. The UK market rate, or London market rate, as you can see, is $65 a night above where it was for the equivalent period back in 2019. I'm not sure, I think it was Park Plaza released their numbers just a couple of weeks ago, but they recognised that they were 16% up in their revenue per room night, but they were still at an occupancy of less than 50%. So there is quite clearly a desire, and a successful desire, to raise the rates, even if that may mean the occupancy is low. And again, I'm not going to get into the political discussion, but there could well be reasons why hoteliers, particularly in cities like London, can't actually manage to run their hotels at full capacity, even if they wanted to. So again, I think that these show that there are lots of fluctuations and variations between the cities within the EMEA region, and there's clearly some very big winners and some fairly significant losers, both in terms of volumes and rates. If we go to the next slide, Catherine. And this is around rate types. So unsurprisingly, sort of during and sort of as we emerged from the pandemic, the rates that were most attractive were the public rates, because hotels were lowering their rates on the retail side, and the rates that had been negotiated on statics and dynamic discounts were above, were below water. So corporations and TMCs rightly chose to ignore the rates they'd negotiated and instead book the public rates. So we're seeing that gradually come back. We're still seeing about 30% of our transient corporate bookings being made at public rates, which probably isn't great for a corporate travel manager who'd probably like to see that figure down around 10 if they could. So I do think it still indicates there are negotiations to be had with a number of properties that may not yet be in the programme, partly because it might be that the travel patterns have changed and those hotels and cities that people were going to aren't the ones that they're going to now. So again, another reason to sort of take a deep dive into the hotel programme and make sure you're mopping up as many of those bookings as you can with a corporate rate of some way, shape or form, or at worst, a chain wide. If we go to the next one, please, Catherine. And the other thing, so we touched on the fact earlier that we're not seeing the big city institutions necessarily coming back and picking up where they left off. Unsurprisingly, probably, we are seeing that the healthcare sector has more than doubled in terms of the number of bookings that we're seeing from them. The sort of industrials are squeezed somewhere in the middle. And what this doesn't show as well is that it's tending to be the SME businesses that have bounced back faster. You know, outside of healthcare, we're seeing the smaller businesses that have put people back on the road much quicker than the really large ones. So again, I'm not sure whether that trend will start to even out as people start to go back into their offices, particularly here in the UK, where when you can't afford to heat your home, you might be more appreciative of going into town and spending 8 hours without having your heating on. So we'll see what sort of trends that starts to bring about. Next slide, Catherine, which I think is sort of my last, and well, it's my last, I hope, and ties in everything that we've just covered briefly, is sort of, we are seeing the volumes return quickly, but I'm nervous. Anxious is too strong a word. Nervous is probably the right word, that with recession and with just the natural cyclical, seasonal trends, that we'll see those volumes drop away towards the end of the year. As I pointed out, not all markets and cities have returned in quite the same way, and it will be interesting again to see whether that starts to even out as the larger organisations start to travel more. I do think it's worth auditing those rates that you've got, because quite clearly they're either not necessarily as attractive as they once were, or they're in the wrong properties. And equally, if you have negotiated a good rate, make sure you're getting it, because the hoteliers at the moment are able to charge a premium on those rooms that they do have available. As I've said, the rates are higher, but that drop in demand may affect pricing coming into Q3 and Q4. So we're thinking that if you are considering an RFP, a short delay or postponement or rolling over your rates for a little longer might benefit you in the long run, because we think we're seeing that the rates have peaked for this year at least. So it might be that a delay makes sense. And as I've said, we've come a long way in 12 months, and it's almost difficult to comprehend just how moribund we were a year ago and how much better we're doing now as an industry. But I do think it needs to be managed like never before. And that threat of, I don't want to end on a low, but that global recession threat, I think will see us probably shift our focus back to cost control. And I think everyone will be focused on that bottom line of the cost of travel as much as anything else. So Catherine, that's me done. Thanks for your time. And again, as Catherine said, if anyone has any questions for me, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box or reach out to me personally anytime. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Peter. And it's clear that we're in for an interesting time. And as I said, the accommodations committee, they've been looking at how to build buyer-supplier relationships based on transparency and trust, leading to better outcomes for both parties. And so we're now going to be joined by Juliet Howie, who Vice President Global Enterprise Sales at 360, and Ben Park, who chairs our European Advisory Board and is Director of Procurement and Travel, or Senior Director of Procurement and Travel at PowerXL, just to talk through what some of these issues are and how that collaboration, that partnership can help. So Ben and Juliet, welcome.
Hello.
Hi there. Now I'm going to stop this share. So, so if we, sort of looking at, Ben, what Peter has given us an awful lot of data there in terms of what the rates are. What are you seeing in terms of rates from suppliers, and how have you been using your supplier network to help through any difficult markets?
Yeah, so definitely I can mirror these numbers, and what I'm seeing from other buyers, that the rates are above 2019 levels. It funny enough matches exactly what he has shown there. And what I see and what I hear is the big issue for the business travel sector is availability combined with very late booking. So the hotel sector has a lot of leisure travelers, and they usually book a lot earlier. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is prices are up compared to 2019 level, and certainly big up from last year. But that was just a special situation. But I think the biggest challenge is at the moment not rates, it's availability and competing with the leisure demand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Julia, you know, as a you know, sort of an individual, you hear in the news every night about like sort of the cost of living crisis and how energy bills are going to go up. But you know, I'd imagine from a supplier perspective, those rising costs in terms of energy and workforce are certainly having an impact on profitability. You know, and on top of this, you know, what is more important, the rate or the value adds, and you know, how can these be better aligned?
Yeah, so basically rates, we've seen an increase of across the accommodation sector of approximately 184% since last year. So that goes with what everyone else is saying. And that's really due to the lack of availability, limited supply, especially in high demand locations. Post-pandemic sees many hotels and service department providers reducing units and not operating fully, you know, and even closing down floors in some cases, hence the increase of demand, and also not helped by the Ukraine war in Central Europe, which has had a squeeze on availability and supply, especially in cities like London and Dublin, which has seen a large upturn in the return of large business groups and also intern programs as well, taking up a lot of availability. The squeeze on profitability is also taking its toll, and as many hotels and accommodation providers are still having to limit services, i.e. provide no daily housekeeping. You know, for example, when you check in, you're told maybe housekeeping is once every 3 days. As I mentioned before, hotel floors closing due to the limited amount of staff and staff availability in the industry, as many have left for better hours and higher paying jobs and haven't returned. So that's a huge challenge. The cost of utilities is going to have an impact moving forward. You know, I was at an event recently and you could feel that the air conditioning was not at full capacity because they can't afford to have it on full capacity. So that's going to take, you know, an impact straight away. And also we look at global economic downturn in high interest rates, inflation and fuel costs. Having said all this, the buyer-supplier relationship is even more important, as I believe working together under a true partnership can help solve each other's challenges and goals and understand the business model together to work out cost efficiencies and value. For example, to help reduce rate, maybe there's an option to evaluate volumes into less suppliers and support supplier growth, which will enable the supplier to negotiate further discounts. Or are there any value adds that can be added into the rate, i.e. transportation costs, which again can be directed through volume buying. So those are some of the options, you know, that buyer-supplier relationships can look at together.
Yeah, so sort of taking a different view on what's offered. Okay, so obviously we've got issues around inflation and the cost of delivery and availability of supply. But the other thing that's coming is sustainability. It's at the front of everybody's minds, and you know, so what one that we look at is in terms of what for you as a buyer, Ben, what you need, and the challenges for the suppliers. So Ben, you know, how do we measure? You know, or how are you measuring sustainability goals and initiatives from suppliers? What are you looking for?
Yeah, we're looking at the accommodation sector now. There, I think we are still lacking standards in terms of reporting and certificates. That's an industry issue. So that's why what I'm seeing from buyers at the moment, we're taking kind of a backseat on certificates, standards, because you're measuring something which later on is not in line with standards. And that's why I think the strategy at the moment sounds very simple, but it's just doing the right thing. So at a hotel, the two major things are water and waste. So just looking out that you don't use water extensively, that you recycle water where necessary. I mean, everybody takes a shower probably in the morning, and that's it. This water needs to be recycled. And then if you look at the restaurants, the breakfast, well, there's a lot of waste and one-time plastic. So in terms of sustainability in the accommodation sector, I think it's really just use common sense at the moment and change your behavior. And I think the hotels are moving in the right direction, but the industry is looking for standards on how to report And this is coming, and I know GBTA is also a big part of this.
Yeah, no, thank you. And so Juliet, from your perspective, you know, what are you seeing buyers looking for? You know, what is recognized?
Yeah, and again, to Ben's point, you know, it's very difficult because there's no standardization, but there are various accreditations which are available to accommodation suppliers, including Equivada, Dun & Bradstreet and CFA, etc. However, there is no standardization, which does present an issue. Typically, more sustainability providers are less reliant on fossil fuel energy, which is having the biggest increase in cost globally. However, we are seeing the release of new properties with net zero accomplishments through the industry, and you know, ourselves, our own 360 supply chain, we're promoting these properties, you know, as much as we can and where appropriate. And agencies like us and TMCs are developing ways to translate a green rating for suppliers at the point of booking, whether that be through technology or online booking tools. And this is the biggest challenge. And I think the launch of the GBTA scorecard, sustainability scorecard, which is coming very soon, will be an excellent tool for buyers and suppliers to match their sustainability goals and support with the RFP information.
Yeah,
and
so it's really about making sure that there's something consistent that you can compare. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
And to match, you know, the buyer, the corporate goals, you know, against what we can then provide as suppliers.
Sure.
But also I looked at a recent Deloitte report, and 3 in 10 companies expect sustainability to cause 11 to 25% reduction in travel budgets by 2025. So,
Right.
you know, companies are really looking at it and taking it seriously, and could impact the whole travel journey.
Yeah, I would say ignore it at your peril, really.
Exactly.
Okay, so duty of care has always been an absolute core part of business travel and the reason for having a travel management program. So Ben, you know, how have you been able to use your partnership with suppliers to ensure that you really, you know, you take care of your travelers as best you can? And have you added anything else in light of recent developments?
Yeah, so me, duty of care in terms of the pandemic is correlating with touchless payments. And I think that's a result of a lot of the initiatives at the front desk, that it has fostered the digitalization and acceptance of virtual payments and using the check-in via the app. So basically, to me, duty of care at the moment is kind of very much digitalization and skip the reception for easy tasks. So people still like to talk to the reception and have a staff there if they've got questions, but for just getting your room number and a key and getting your invoice sent to your email, you don't need the reception. I think this is for me a key result, that all the unnecessary interactions, or where people have to stand without necessary distance, have been removed, and hotels have been doing a great job on changing the processes. So great progress.
Yeah, so that whole thing about like sort of trying to streamline processes and reducing lack or chance of infection. And I think actually there's also that it just takes so much stress out, doesn't it? There's definitely a traveler wellbeing element, certainly in my case. You know, Julia, are there any other measures that, you know, from the accommodation industry?
Yeah, I would say that the need for more reporting and information on duty of care has certainly increased since the pandemic, and many accommodation providers have looked at adding tools and reporting in place to help with that travel journey, along with the enhanced digital apps that Ben was talking about, and data to supply the support of the travel program. For example, we at 360 work with GeoShore, which is a data bank of stats that support the traveller on scoring for each property and location they use, with a percentage score which is broken down into safety, health, criminal data, as well as many TMCs have traveller tracker technology to support the journey and identify any issues that could happen, along with the ISOS data. But generally, to summarise, the technology solutions that really help define the duty of care is the geotagging solutions, which is real-time safety data, booking platforms, risk identification, environmental and property risk, supply chain data, all the travel apps and payment apps, tech with built-in checklists for a trip, and most importantly, as well as the technology, 24/7 guest communication support. You know, people still need that hand-holding and customer support, which can help in, difficult situations, and as things develop, on their journey, they need to sometimes speak to someone as well.
Yeah, so thinking about the traveler journey, I think there are sort of various things that are forces that are reshaping that. Part of it being, the whole thing around the pandemic, as you say, Ben, the change, the digitalization of the check-in process, economic challenges and cost of fuel. So there's like a financial imperative on organizations to rethink their traveler journey. But, Ben, from your perspective, what key steps are you maybe thinking about in terms of the transformation of the travel journey to make sure that, your policy is kept, but also that the travelers have a good experience?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And what I'm seeing is definitely two things. One is we have to remember a lot of travelers have not been traveling for a couple of years and they are new to the company. If you look at usual, like how many people have joined the company in the last 2 years, and they don't know the travel apps, they don't know the journey, they don't know the company policy. So I think number one is retraining to ensure they understand the journey, the policies. The second thing, what I'm seeing, there is a big shift towards putting the traveler into the center. Before 2019, it was a lot about like process efficiency, keeping costs down and all this. And now it's about more about the traveler and their needs. And so that's what I'm seeing, that the policy is taking a little backseat and the experience is put into the center. And that's why the journey is about a lot about the traveler and their feelings and their expectations, and a little bit less about like the CFO view.
Yeah, no, it's funny you're saying that. I used to be able to pack, I think, probably in about 8 minutes. Now it takes me a good 45. It's a painful process. So yes, I think everybody is a little bit rusty about that. Juliet, from your perspective, what are you as an industry or as a sector?
Exactly what Ben's saying. I think, the return to travel, we've seen a huge upturn, but the travelers themselves are just not confident, in the whole journey, what to expect. And there's many new people traveling that aren't used to global travel. So I think, support through tech and apps can help the traveler, help with less touch points to give them more confidence for checking, maybe ordering food, travel information, local facilities and wellness apps. Also, in addition to the usual beauty and relaxation spa offering, we're seeing a rapid demand for health diagnostic technology and bespoke treatment plans, which is delivered by experts who conduct personal or group sessions to develop vitality, healing, stress management, emotional balance, mindfulness and better sleep. For example, we work with someone called Delos, which is like they offer stay well rooms and also provide better air quality and enhanced sleep solutions, as well as mind breaks through their app. So, the whole well-being and mental part of the journey, I think, needs support. In addition to all the techs available, though, suppliers partnering with buyers need to ensure there is a person to help and support, as I said before, on that 24-hour support system, and do any hand-holding for any nervous travelers during their stay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it seems that the traveler experience is absolutely, it seems to be more important than ever. But, what changes have you seen, Ben, that sort of means that there's sort of, if you think about the stress points, there's obviously the thing around traveling, there's the thing around staying, but actually booking can be quite stressful as possible as well. So how are you, working to enable like a seamless booking experience, sort of seamless transition from the booking experience to the stay?
It's a difficult thing at the moment, because in the past, buyers were trying to consolidate volumes to like one hotel in an area. So the choices have not been that many. That's why the experience was kind of easier. Now, as availability is an issue, you're like, I'm happy to get a rate somewhere in availability. On the other side, people see a lot of hotels offered in the OBTs sometimes, which confuses. So at the moment, it's kind of a not easy situation. where availability is the issue. But what I'm seeing is definitely a push on the experience is the central payment, which is also in the OBT there, which helps with the experience of the hotel. And another trend we are watching is that employees are looking for more information about the hotel in terms of CSR activities. So what is the hotel standing for? Are they supporting local communities? Are they serving local food? And honestly, none of this data is available that easily without like 10 clicks down. So I think we're seeing a trend on the questions which are asked, and I think it's a very good trend. So we should all work on this in the industry to support that.
Yeah, there's definitely like a different sort of almost like a mindful or purposeful way of, sort of, it's not only getting yourself to where you need to be, it's all the other things around that. Juliet, what about from your perspective?
I think from the accommodation side, there's been a huge increase for demand in alternative accommodation. For example, we all know the service department industry has really come into its own over the last 18 months as an attractive option, and probably partly due to being self-contained in your own unit, kitchen, work desk, and seamless check-ins with limited touch points, but mostly the additional of space versus your kind of standard hotel room. Also, there's been an increase in demand in different types of accommodation, like private houses or holiday homes used for business, but the homes located by the beach or in the countryside, as people don't always have to go directly to the office. Having said that, though, hotels is always still a very attractive option, and many hotels have supported the return to business to the office by offering membership deals. So that includes the use of a bedroom for a daily use, for office working from home, food and beverage included, and Wi-Fi for a daily fee or monthly memberships. And that's probably still a trend that's still going to continue.
Yeah. So, right. So it seems that there are things that are impacting us, which are about right now, whether it's about sort of constraint on supply and increased costs. There are things which there's innovation that has been, that has been driven as a result of the pandemic. There are shifts in mindset. There are just like big macro issues that are affecting us all, like sustainability, and so on. And as you said, Ben, that like sort of more that desire to buy into things that you believe in. Which of these or any of the other trends that we have talked about do you think is the thing that is going to stick, that is not going to be it's just right now at a very, very unusual time in our history? Ben, which is it for you?
I think that the way people are using hotels in different areas, so there's work from anywhere, so that maybe a typical business hotel will be at the beach because they just can log in and work from there. And I think this will stay, that people will use the freedom to work from anywhere where the company feels comfortable, and this shift will stay, I think.
Yeah. Juliet, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think technology enhancements are always going to continue developing and improving through customization, all sorts of different customizations, tools, booking, pace, preferences, information apps, showing more virtual experience tied into maybe sustainability, performance. Some accommodation providers have an app where you can already download before you stay, and before you check in, you can reduce the lighting in your room, the water usage and heating controls. And I think the increase of those is going to happen. But also, the travelers are becoming more savvy on their business trips, and there's a huge increase for leisure stays, should I say the word leisure, but leisure stays to maximize their trips by bringing on a partner or a family member. And sometimes they may start in a hotel as part of that business journey, then may move to a private house, as Ben was saying, by the beach or something, to continue then their working from home, but leisure stay as well. So I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, no, well, I think it's very clear that there is, that buyers are definitely taking account of the sort of change in mindset and sensitivities around travelers, and the industry and the sector is definitely responding to that. So Peter, thank you so much for your insights. Ben and Juliet, thank you very much for sharing your views today. And So, and also to Jens, our European board member, thank you for joining us on the town hall today. I hope you find it very useful. There will be a link to a recording posted on our website and also on the on our network news. So so if you want to relive this experience or share it with your friends, you can do so. But thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day.